Washington Commanders versus the Dallas Cowboys. The final score was 10-45. Was not a fun game to watch, but I watched it anyway. Now Jack Del Rio, the Commanders' defensive coordinator, was let go today after Ron Rivera suggested it. But there have been discussions about whether Ron Rivera should be let go as the head coach of the Washington Commanders. Eric Bieniemy is the offensive coordinator there, and it seems like Ron Rivera is going to be taking over as defensive coordinator, or at least have more say with the defensive play calling. So, what do you think about Ron Rivera? Should he be out of there? Is he donezo?
I've never been the biggest fan of Ron Rivera. And, seeing him with Washington these last, couple years, I think it's gotten a little bit worse because he hasn't done even a great job at leading the locker room. Rob Saleh, who's a coach for the Jets, who I don't really like all too much right now, I could say he's done a great job at leading the locker room. Rivera, to my understanding, is not very well liked by his players. He's not done a great job of bringing in free agency signings. So what has he done? Has he won? Not even that, right? So Ron Rivera as a coach, I think this should be the end of his journey. I think the Commanders, they have a lot of pieces they can pick up, but getting rid of your two best pass rushers shows me that front office, they're not trying to pick up those pieces. They're trying to move on. So I think Ron Rivera is just a victim that has to be killed as part of this rebuild.
So I've had discussions with people about this, and I am kind of a Ron Rivera apologist, and I understand the frustrations. I understand there's no winning, but there's no talent on the team, on the Washington Commanders. I mean, you didn't really have a quarterback to work with until this year. Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke, and a returning off of an injury that almost killed him, Alex Smith, were not going to win you a lot of games. And I'm sorry to those guys, but I think we all know that. Defensively, okay, you can say they have a ton of first-round picks on the defense. You just traded two of them. You traded two of your, like you said, best defenders away. Terry McLaurin is really the only guy on offense you've had for a while who's super talented. This is the first year that you are not being ran by the most corrupt owner in the NFL, possibly in sports history. Everything that Dan Snyder did was awful. It was not focused on winning football games. And I am very much a person, and it might be because I witnessed Zach Taylor, and I saw people be like, Zach Taylor's awful, fire him. First season. Then second season, it gets better. Third season, it gets even better. And, as they build their culture, maybe I'm wrong here, but I would like to see Ron Rivera kind of get to actually build his culture under a team, because he's taken a team to the Super Bowl before. And I looked it up. People are saying he's a defensive moron. When he was the defensive coordinator for the Chargers in 2009, they were ranked 16th overall. The Chargers defense was. In 2010, they were first. 2011, he became the Panthers head coach. I don't think there's a lot of personnel changes between 1 year. And to get a team from average to the best in the NFL, that's an impressive thing. So he clearly knows something. And maybe he doesn't have the locker room, but he has been through a ton on the Commanders. He's been through corrupt ownership. He had cancer that he beat. He hasn't really had a lot of talent to work with, and I don't know how much of a say he has with getting players in. I know he said he wanted Carson Wentz. I don't know if that's true or if he was just saying that so that the media would shut up about the whole narrative that he didn't want Carson Wentz. And he was kind of trying to help Carson. I think he cares a lot about the players. And then the other thing is, no one's talking about how Eric Bieniemy, as the offensive coordinator, he's supposed to be this offensive guru that made Patrick Mahomes who he is. Now they're only putting up 10 points on offense. So you're not going to win a lot of football games, even with an average defense, if your offensive coordinator is only calling plays that get you 10 points. And you know that. You're a Jets fan. That's like the Jets' whole problem, is they can't put offensive points on the board. They can only put defensive points on the board. So I understand why people want Ron fired. But I think he could still make a good defensive coordinator in the NFL. That would be my take.
I don't think his career should be done, but I do think for Washington to have any sort of success in the near future, I think a rebuild is necessary. And that includes rebuilding your offensive and defensive schemes. They don't have the pieces to work. And, in the years they've had Rivera, they haven't had the pieces to make this work, to make their offense or their defense, stick out. So I think you do have to get someone in the building who, perhaps a young kind of up and coming coach. Look at the Dolphins or even the Jets, what they were trying to do, or the Giants, what they were attempting to do, right? Get someone in the building who could put a new system. That way you could bring in the correct pieces to this team.
And this goes back to the Jared Goff conversation we just had. If you fire Ron Rivera, who do you bring in as your head coach? Obviously, the first choice people are going to point to is Eric Bieniemy. But he's been through a ton of head coaching interviews, hasn't been hired for some reason, and people are going to say the narrative before was because of racism. But DeMeco Ryans was hired, and you have all these other head coaches who are African American. Mike Tomlin's still there, even though we called for him to be fired, or Chuss called for him to be fired. But there are other coaches who are being hired. Granted, the majority are white. I'll grant you that. But I don't think that's the reason Eric Bieniemy isn't being hired. I'm wondering if there's some sort of personality thing, or maybe in Washington he just had to prove it. But you have to, if you're going to fire a guy, you have to have someone to replace him immediately. Right? No, you go.
I agree with you saying you should have someone to replace him, but personally, I think Rivera's an off-season type of guy. You let him go at that point, and maybe you take, a month or so to figure it out. With Rivera, my only worry, I guess, about if Washington gets rid of him is that, as you mentioned, he does have a lot of talent. He can bring a lot to other teams in the league. I don't like Adam Gase all too much. I know you don't like him particularly either, but we haven't seen him even on a coaching staff, right, since he got cut. So it's a little bit worrisome as to whether all of the blame of Washington will be placed on him, or whether some other team will give him a chance, even at a lower level.
Yeah, I don't know. I think some of the blame is definitely on Ron Rivera because he is the head coach. I think he's getting a little bit more blame than what he should be. And Washington fans may have gotten a little too excited about what this season was going to be. I had Washington fans telling me they were going to win the division because there's never been a repeat division winner in the NFC East in so many years. I was like, yeah, but you have to beat the Eagles and the Cowboys. And they're like, Eagles are out just because of this trend. I don't know about that. And Eagles might break that trend with the rate they're at right now. But we'll see what happens with Ron Rivera. Thanks for watching that video, guys. If you want to check out a most recent full episode of No Buts About It, that's going to be right over here. Yeah, right there. Check that out. And if you just want to see more short clips, we're going to have one right over here for you to watch. Check out No Buts About It on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you listen to podcasts, so you can listen to us on the go. Once again, have a great day and go do something nice for someone.